Hey there, Mr. Mystery here. Before we dive in tonight, take a second and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. Your city, your country, maybe that little town where nothing ever happens, or so they say. If you like settling in with unsettling stories, real crimes, strange legends, and the shadows people try to hide, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and tap the like too. It helps me keep bringing you the kind of dark, chilling tales you can drift off to, if you can sleep, that is. Alright, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Tonight, before you drift off, picture this. Tokyo, late 1980s, a city pushing fast into neon dreams and high-tech futures. But in its quiet, suburban corners, there were shadows nobody saw coming. One of those shadows was Tsutomu Miyazaki, later called the human Dracula. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like the kid you might pass in a library. Awkward, thin, eyes that never quite met yours. He was born in Tsukachi, a sleepy town west of Tokyo. The Miyazaki family was wealthy, old money, a big family business. But behind the family's clean reputation, Tsutomu was born with broken hands. His wrists fused to his forearms, his fingers stunted like tiny claws. Other kids stared at him when he held a pencil. He learned early to hide those hands in his pockets. Growing up, he buried himself in manga and horror videos. People said he'd stay locked in his tiny bedroom for hours. Tapes stacked floor to ceiling. He was invisible to most. Teachers remember him as polite but off, always mumbling about monsters and horror comics. His parents? Busy, distant. His mother barely looked at him. His father, who ran a family print shop, just shook his head when Tsutomu failed to get into the prestigious Meiji University. Instead, he shuffled through junior college. No ambition, no friends, no dates. He never learned how to touch another human with kindness. His grandfather was the only warmth he had. But in May 1988, the old man died, and that tiny, brittle thread holding Tsutomu together snapped. He was seen kneeling by the family grave for hours. He even dug up part of the ashes, storing them in a jar in his room. Some say he ate some a desperate way to feel close to the only soul who'd never mocked him. And that summer, something changed in his eyes. On August 22, 1988, only a day after he turned 26, he drove his black Nissan Langley into Saitama Prefecture, a quiet suburb north of Tokyo. There, in Hano City, he found 4-year-old Mari Kano playing alone in a park. The sun was bright, the trees green, families were nearby, but it only took a moment of looking away. He told her he'd take her to see a rare cartoon video. She trusted him. Why wouldn't she? He didn't look like a killer. He strangled her in the woods nearby. He kept her tiny corpse for days, photographing it, cutting it apart. And then he did something that made even hardened detectives go pale. He removed her hands and feet. He burned some bones in his fireplace, then mailed her charred teeth and her cremated ashes in a box to her parents, along with a creepy postcard. Mari, cremated, bones, investigate, prove. Weeks later, he'd sneak to her funeral, standing at the edge, watching Mari's parents weep over an urn. Some say he took pictures. Who does that? Who feeds off the grief like that? He didn't stop there. October 3rd, 1988, his next target, 7-year-old Masami Yoshizawa. He spotted her walking alone along a rural road in Iruma City, Saitama. Again, he lured her into his car with soft talk, told her he'd show her a fun place. He strangled her in a forest, clearing near the reservoir, then left her tiny clothes folded beside the dirt. Later, when police asked how he felt, he just shrugged. He went to Masami's funeral too, drifting among black-suited mourners, unnoticed. Some claim he even stood by her mother, pretending to pay respects. He loved funerals, the weeping, the family's pain. It fed something deep inside him. By December 12, 1988, he was braver. 4-year-old Erica Namba had been playing in a friend's yard in Kawago, a sleepy suburban city. Tsutomu waited by a bridge nearby, then convinced her to ride with him. He strangled her near a park, then abandoned her corpse under a rural cemetery. To confuse police, he called Erica's home multiple times. Silent calls, just breathing. Imagine picking up the phone, hoping it's your lost child, only to hear a stranger's breath. Miyazaki didn't fear police. He toyed with them. He drove back to Erica's dump site days later to photograph what was left. His last known victim was 5-year-old Ayako Nomoto, kidnapped near her home in Saitama on June 6, 1989. This time, he took her to his apartment. There, he strangled her, took photos, filmed parts, and left her body in his closet like she was just another tape on his shelf. When he was done, he dismembered her, carefully washing parts in his bathtub, storing others in a plastic bag in the hills behind his home. A hiker found fragments weeks later. He wasn't careful about the stench. Neighbors remember the strange sour smell drifting from his apartment, but no one said anything. He was just the odd boy with monster posters on the wall. He kept visiting the graves, slipping in at dusk, candles flickering, pretending to be a mourner. Some said he even left tiny offerings, just so he could watch parents find them and wonder. And yet, Tsutomu Miyazaki was caught not by high-tech detective work, but by luck and fury. On July 23, 1989, in a Tokyo suburb, he tried to lure 2 sisters, 7 and 5 years old, to pose nude by a riverbank. Their father spotted him, chased him down, beat him bloody. Locals pinned him to the pavement until police came. Inside his tiny bedroom, police found his horror library. Thousands of tapes, neat folders of clippings about his own crimes, boxes of tiny shoes and clothes, and letters he'd planned to send to other grieving families. When asked why he did it, Tsutomu claimed an alter ego, Ratman. He said it was the Ratman who controlled him, the Ratman who demanded he drink blood and eat flesh. Psychiatrists tried to figure him out. Some called him schizophrenic. Some said he was perfectly sane, but corrupted by deep sexual sadism. He sat on death row for nearly 2 decades, sketching cartoon monsters and refusing to see his mother when she finally came. When his father read what he'd done in the paper, he killed himself, ashamed of the family name. In 2008, Japan quietly executed Tsutomu Miyazaki by hanging. He died alone, no funeral this time. His ashes vanished, same as the children he destroyed. Even now, in Saitama and Tokyo suburbs, parents tell children not to wander off alone. Older people still flinch when they see a black Nia-san in an old photo. And somewhere in the back of Japan's mind is the whisper. Some monsters are born from horror, but some make their own horror, one tiny victim at a time. If you're still here, tell me this. Could you look at that polite, quiet young man on the street and ever guess what lived behind those cold eyes? Let me know in the comments if you'd have trusted him. Would you have looked away? Just for a second? Lock your doors tonight. Check on the ones you love. And if you're drifting off to sleep now, remember, monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they stand beside the grave, head bowed, pretending to mourn what they stole. This one is about Gilgo Beach, about a stretch of sand and scrub brush where the Atlantic wind whispers secrets and where, for over a decade, bodies kept turning up just out of sight of New York's glittering skyline. Some people call him the Long Island serial killer, or just Lisk. Some say he's still out there. Some say they might have finally caught him. But the echoes of what happened there, they don't fade easy. It starts back in May 1st, 2010, when a young woman named Shannon Gilbert, a 24-year-old escort, called 911. She was near Oak Beach, a gated community right by Gilgo Beach on Long Island's South Shore. Her voice on that tape? It's haunting. She told the dispatcher, "They're trying to kill me. Please help me." She ran into the dark marshland, barefoot, She was never seen alive again. If you ask me, that moment changed everything, because nobody was really looking for a serial killer that night. They were looking for Shannon. 7 months later, a police officer and his cadaver dog found something buried in the brush along Ocean Parkway. It wasn't Shannon. It was a skeleton in burlap, the remains of Melissa Bartholomew, a 24-year-old who'd gone missing in 2009. Then, 3 more sets of bones appeared nearby. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, missing since 2007. Megan Waterman, gone since 2010. Amber Lynn Costello, vanished the same year. All young women. All advertised escort services online. All wrapped in burlap. Left like secrets only the tall dune grass would keep. People in those quiet beach communities couldn't believe it. They'd always thought of Gilgo as sleepy, isolated, safe. A good place to live cheap, far from the city's noise. But now they realized they'd been living near someone who hunted at night. Someone who knew how to disappear just as well as the women he chose. As the search widened, more bodies surfaced. Parts of other victims, some just skulls, some only partial remains. Some dumped years apart, some possibly tied to other cold cases all the way back to the 90s. One victim became known only as Peaches because of a peach tattoo on her torso. Nobody could give her real name. Her remains were scattered in different places, as if someone wanted to make sure she'd never be whole again. In total, the list grew. 10, maybe more. And what really twists the stomach is how close they all were to the parkway, as if the killer didn't care if they were found, or maybe wanted them to be. The police tried to keep up, but theories tangled fast. Some detectives thought it was one killer, organized, careful, calculating. Others wondered if it was more than one. A dumping ground for multiple monsters who found the same hidden corner of New York's underbelly. Meanwhile, Shannon Gilbert's body wasn't found with the others. A year later, they found her further into the marsh. Some claim she drowned, panicked, and lost in the dark. Her family never believed that. Her mother, Mari Gilbert, fought until her dying day to prove Shannon was murdered by the same man who left the others in burlap. Here is something you might not know. The Gilgo Beach murders almost vanished from headlines until 2016, when an HBO film about Shannon put it back in the public's mind. People started to ask, how can a serial killer dump bodies within view of million-dollar beach houses? And nobody knows who he is? Years passed. Tips came and went. Internet sleuths argued on forums for years. Then, in 2022, a cold case unit got fresh eyes on old clues. Cell phone pings, burner phones taunting calls the killer allegedly made to some victims' families. They found DNA in burlap, a belt with an initial, a trail that finally led them to a name. Rex Hoyerman, an architect living in Massapequa Park, right near the dump sites. In July 2023, police arrested Hoyerman at his office in Manhattan. A quiet family man, big house, kids, a normal job. But inside that house, they found a hidden soundproof room. Weapons, maps, burners. Hoyerman pleaded not guilty, but prosecutors say they have phone data, DNA, and witness statements. The trial is still ahead. So, did they really catch the Long Island serial killer? Or did they catch one man with secrets while others slipped back into the dunes? Some nights, the ocean wind along Gilgo Beach carries the same rumor, that somewhere out there, the dunes still hide stories nobody wants to find. That if you stand alone on Ocean Parkway at midnight, you'll feel eyes watching you from behind the tall grass, waiting to choose the next name nobody remembers until they re-gone. I'll ask you, would you walk that lonely road alone? Drop your theory in the comments. Do you think Hoyerman did it alone? Or did the dunes keep more than one monster secret for all those years? If you are still here with me, Mr. Mystery, lock your doors tonight. And if you dream of waves crashing on a quiet shore, remember, some things left on a beach never come back.
They say there's an old rusted school bus hidden in the woods, and that it's better to leave it alone. Back in 1978, the town's tiny elementary school used an old yellow bus to pick up kids along the country roads. One winter morning, the bus didn't make it to school. Snowstorm hit fast that morning, but the driver, Mr. Harlan, thought he could make it. The bus never arrived. Parents, teachers, and local police searched the back roads for hours. When the snow cleared, they found tire tracks leading off the main road into the woods, but no bus. Weeks passed. Search teams found nothing. Some said the bus must have slid into the river. Others said Mr. Harlan had run off with someone's kids. But no one believed that. Mr. Harlan was a quiet man with a sick wife and no money to run away. Years later, hunters found it by accident. Deep in the trees where no road led anymore, the bus was empty. No driver, no kids, the seats were ripped out. The windows were gone. Some believed the driver never left. An old blanket lay across the driver's seat, and behind it, scratched into the metal wall, were the words, "They're still here." No one knows what that means. Some teenagers who sneaked out there at night said they heard soft giggling when they stepped inside the rusted shell. Others said they saw tiny handprints on the fogged windows, even though the windows had no glass left. Parents warned their kids to stay away from that stretch of woods, said the bus was cursed. Some think whatever took that bus off the road still waits in those trees, looking for kids who dan to come home on time. The old brass key hangs on a nail in his office, dusty and unused. He was quiet, paid rent in cash, and never spoke to anyone. The town fenced off the trail years ago, but the bus is still out there, hidden under vines and rotting leaves.
Nice.
Sometimes in winter, when the wind is sharp and the snow is heavy, hunters say they hear an old engine idling in the woods, and children's voices whispering through the trees. The locked room. In a small town in upstate New York, there is a rundown boarding house that has stood for more than 80 years. People say it was built in the 1930s for factory workers who came through town for a few months at a time. Now it sits mostly empty, except for a few tenants who can't afford much else. On the top floor, at the end of a narrow hallway, there is one room that no one rents anymore. Room 7. The landlord, Mr. Rourke, keeps it locked. People say that years ago, in the winter of 1951, a man named Howard Bell stayed there for 3 months. He worked nights at the textile mill and slept all day. But one morning, another tenant heard something strange. A radio playing so loud that it rattled the walls. Mr. Rourke's father, the landlord at that time, went up to knock. No one answered. Sometimes they smelled cigarette smoke drifting under the door, even when the whole floor was empty. He unlocked the door and found Howard sitting in a chair by the window, staring out at the snowy street. If they pass by at night, they walk fast and keep their eyes on the floor. But he still keeps room 7 locked. He says the last time he opened it was in 1998 when a homeless man broke in during winter. The radio was blasting static. Howard didn't move or speak. When the landlord stepped closer, he realized Howard was dead, but his eyes were wide open and his mouth was twisted like he had been screaming. After the funeral, room 7 sat empty for years. Once in the 1970s, a college student named Peter rented it because it was cheap. The first night, Peter woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of a radio playing in the corner. Even though there was no radio in the room, he checked the hallway empty. But when he came back, the sound grew louder, mixed with a low mumbling like someone was talking through the walls. He packed his bags before dawn and moved out that same week. Over the years, other tenants claimed they heard the radio too. Mr. Rourke tells people it's just old pipes and thin walls. They found him sitting by the window, eyes open wide, mouth frozen in a silent scream, just like Howard Bell. The other tenants leave that end of the hallway alone. Sometimes when the wind is strong, you can hear faint static behind the door, like a radio stuck between stations, waiting for someone to listen. The Hitchhiker on Route 41. Route 41 runs through a stretch of lonely countryside in northern Illinois. Truckers call it the long black ribbon because at night the road feels endless. Just you, your headlights, and the dark fields on both sides. One summer night in 1999, A man named Mark Holloway was driving home from a late shift at a factory outside Chicago. It was almost 2 a.m. He'd been awake nearly 20 hours and could feel his eyelids getting heavy. About 20 miles from his exit, he saw a figure on the side of the road. A woman, standing alone, her thumb out, wearing a pale blue dress that didn't look warm enough for the night air. Mark slowed down and pulled over. She walked up to his window and asked in a soft voice, "Can you take me to the next town? My car broke down." Mark hesitated. He'd always heard stories about picking up strangers, but she looked scared and cold, so he unlocked the passenger door. Mark tried to make small talk, but she just stared out the window. She climbed in and thanked him. Mark noticed she was barefoot. Her skin looked almost gray in the dashboard light. They drove in silence for a few miles. Then halfway to the next town, she turned to him and said, "You should slow down." A truck was barreling up behind him, fast. Mark looked at the speedometer. He wasn't speeding. He asked why. Mark's heart pounded so loud he couldn't hear the radio anymore. She whispered, "He's coming." Before Mark could ask who, headlights appeared in his rearview mirror, high beams that flooded the inside of his car. He swerved into the lot, tires screaming, and jumped out yelling for help. The truck swerved left and right, flashing its lights like it was trying to blind him. When they checked the road, there was no sign of the truck. Mark gripped the wheel. He tried to pull over, but the truck stayed right on his bumper, horn blaring. He said, "You're not the first. There's been stories for years about a girl in a blue dress. She always appears before something bad happens." He looked at the woman, but the passenger seat was empty. The door was still closed. Seatbelt was buckled, but she was gone. He pressed the gas, trying to outrun the truck, but the road curved, and he almost lost control. The truck rammed his bumper once, then twice. At the last second, Mark saw a gas station sign glowing ahead. The truck never followed him in. It just kept going down Route 41, disappearing into the night. The gas station clerk called the police. She liked to stand at the big living room window and wave to the mailman every afternoon. Mark told them about the woman. The clerk listened and nodded slowly. Some say she was a hitchhiker who got hit by a truck on that road decades ago, still trying to warn people who drive too late, too tired, too alone. She walked downstairs for water and saw a movement near the living room window, a flicker of a shadow outside. Mark never drove Route 41 again after dark, but truckers still see the girl, barefoot by the roadside, waiting to get in. He parked on the street, walked up the path, and noticed the curtains in the living room pulled wide open. A man inches behind his daughter. Right after the mailman left, she saw a figure standing behind the hedge, a man in a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat. But when he burst into the room, Emily was alone, standing on the couch, staring at the window. The face in the window in the suburbs of Minneapolis. There's a street where all the houses look the same. Small lawns, chain-link fences, porch lights that flicker in winter. In 2004, the Johnson family moved into one of those houses, 3 bedrooms, a leaky basement, but it was all they could afford. No forced entry, no footprints in the fresh snow outside the window. Some say if you look close enough, you'll see a pale face behind the glass, wearing a dark hat, smiling back at you. Their daughter Emily was 8 years old. They didn't sell the house, they just abandoned it, too scared to go back. She said the man was lonely. He just wanted to smile at her. One November evening, Mrs. Johnson was cooking dinner when she heard Emily whispering near the window. When she asked who she was talking to, Emily said, "The man with the hat. He smiles at me when the mailman leaves." Mrs. Johnson looked outside. Nothing but their empty yard and the cracked sidewalk. She laughed it off, thinking Emily was playing pretend. But that night, after everyone went to bed, Mrs. Johnson woke up thirsty. She flipped on the porch light, but the yard was empty. The next evening, she kept watch. She opened the door and shouted, but the man slipped away fast, disappearing down the street. The police came, walked the yard, told them to keep their doors locked. Maybe just a prowler, they said. For a few weeks, nothing happened. Then, one night, Mr. Johnson came home late from work. Inside, Emily stood at the window, but behind her, reflected in the glass, was a tall, dark shape. Mr. Johnson dropped his keys, ran inside yelling. She told them calmly, "The man says he wants to come in and sit with me." Terrified, the Johnsons called the police again. Officers searched the house, the attic, the basement. That night, they boarded up the window. Emily cried when they did. The Johnsons packed up and moved out a month later. Neighbors say kids still dare each other to peek through that old living room window at night. The tenant in apartment 2A. There's an old 3-story apartment building in Milwaukee. It's been standing since the 1920s. It's the kind of place people only rent when they have no other choice. Creaky floors, stained ceilings, heat that never works in winter. In 2012, a college student named Hannah moved into apartment 2A. It was cheap, close to her campus, and all she could afford. The landlord, Mrs. Keller, was an elderly woman who lived on the ground floor and liked to remind tenants to keep the halls quiet. The first month, everything was fine. Hannah studied late into the night and barely slept. But she started noticing things. Small, harmless things at first. Sometimes when she came home, her bathroom light would be on even though she always turned it off. She'd find her toothbrush moved or a window cracked open she knew she'd locked. One night around 3 a.m., she woke up to the sound of footsteps in the apartment above hers. Slow, steady, pacing back and forth. When she asked Mrs. Keller the next day, who lived upstairs, the old woman frowned and said, "No one's rented 3A for over a year. I keep it locked." Hannah thought maybe it was the old pipes or a raccoon, but the footsteps continued. Always at 3 a.m., always pacing in circles. He grabbed a broom handle and banged on the ceiling. One weekend her boyfriend Kyle came to stay. He heard it too. The footsteps stopped. But then there was a knock at their door. When Kyle opened it, the hallway was empty except for a single folded piece of paper on the doormat. On it was a simple message, written in jagged block letters. "Quiet, please. Some of us are trying to rest." He showed the note to Mrs. Keller. She looked pale, then told them a story. He was quiet, paid his rent in cash, didn't talk to anyone. Years ago, a man named Walter Greeley had lived in 3A. One winter, neighbors complained about a terrible smell. When the police broke in, they found Walter dead in his bed. Weeks gone, radio still playing softly beside him. Some nights, Hannah would wake to find her closet door open, clothes pushed aside like someone had been standing inside. Mrs. Keller tried to rent 3A again, but every new tenant broke their lease within weeks, claiming they couldn't sleep because of someone pacing all night. Around 3 a.m., the footsteps started, then the scratching, then a soft humming, like a lullaby from the room above. He grabbed Hannah's spare key for the 3rd floor, which Mrs. Keller had left with her when the plumber came by. So she stopped renting it, kept the door locked tight. Hannah and Kyle decided to forget about it. Maybe it was an old story to scare new tenants. But the footsteps got louder each night. When they reached 3A, the hallway was freezing cold. Hannah's breath came out in clouds. Then the scratching started, soft at first like nails on the wall behind her bed. One night, Kyle stayed over again. By the time they got downstairs, Mrs. Keller was waiting in her bathrobe like she already knew. Kyle couldn't take it. They climbed the stairs together, hearts pounding. The door wasn't locked. It hung open an inch. Kyle pushed it open. The room was dark, empty except for an old mattress and a single chair by the window. On the wall, written over peeling wallpaper, were dozens of lines in the same jagged handwriting. Quiet, resting, quiet, resting. In the corner, something moved. A dark shape crouched behind the chair. Hannah slammed the door, locked it, and ran. Hannah moved out a week later. She didn't take her furniture, just left. Most people only stay there when their car breaks down or they're too tired to keep driving. He set his alarm, kicked off his shoes, and fell into bed, still wearing his tie. The building is still there. Apartment 3A is still empty, locked tight. He sat up, heart pounding. Thin, soaked hair clinging to her face, dark dress plastered to her shoulders. But on cold nights, tenants say you can hear someone pacing back and forth, waiting for the building to fall silent again. The motel room key, off a quiet stretch of Interstate 70 in Kansas. There's an old roadside motel that's barely changed since the 1960s. A single neon sign buzzes all night, the paint flakes off the doors. In 2007, a traveling salesman named Greg checked in late on a rainy Tuesday night. He'd been driving for 14 hours, drifting in and out of sleep at the wheel, when he saw the flickering vacancy sign. The old man at the front desk gave him a brass key for room 12. Greg parked outside his door, grabbed his small suitcase and pushed inside. Stale cigarette smell, faded curtains, bedspread with old floral print. Greg didn't care. Around 2 a.m., a loud knock jolted him awake. He just said, "That key's yours tonight." Another knock, slow and deliberate. He peered through the peephole. A woman stood there in the rain. She knocked again, softer this time. Greg cracked the door but kept the chain on. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman looked up, her eyes wide and unfocused. She whispered, "He has my key." They checked in with one key. Greg frowned. What key? No bags, no note, no sign she ever left. She pressed her palm flat against the door, leaving a wet print. Room 12. "He has it. Let me in." Greg's stomach twisted. "This is my room. Maybe your," before he could finish, she stepped back, turned, and vanished into the darkness. He shut the door fast, flipped the deadbolt, and sat awake the rest of the night. At dawn, he went to the front desk. The same old man was there, reading a newspaper. Greg asked if anyone else had a key for room 12. The old man didn't look up. Greg told him about the woman, how she'd knocked, how she said he had her key. The old man sighed, put down the paper, and told Greg a story. Back in 1989, a man named Arthur stayed in room 12. He brought his girlfriend. Young, sweet people said. 2 days later, the maid found Arthur alone. The girl was gone. When the sheriff asked what happened, Arthur just kept saying, "She has my key. She took my key." Arthur died in prison. They never found the girl. The old man told Greg some people say she still knocks on that door when it rains, looking for the key or the man who took it. Greg left his room an hour later, key still sitting on the dresser. He never picked it up again. The motel is still there. Room 12 still rents out when drivers get desperate. Some say if you listen close, you'll hear a soft knock after midnight and a voice whispering, "He has my key." The missing portrait in a small historic town in Virginia sits a big old brick house known to locals as the Ashford Place. It was built before the Civil War, 4 stories high. It's with creaking wooden floors and faded floral wallpaper peeling off the hallways. For decades, it's been rented out to students and young couples who want cheap rent and Dan T-mine the drafts. But there's always one thing everyone notices. The big oval portrait in the upstairs hallway. The portrait shows a young woman in a blue dress, hair pinned up, eyes calm but sad. People say her name was Eliza Ashford, daughter of the original owner. In the 1920s, Eliza disappeared. Her parents said she ran off with a traveling salesman. Some say her father caught them and did something terrible. No one knows for sure. Only that she vanished one stormy night, and her room was locked up tight for years after. Every tenant since then has said the same thing. The portrait feels alive. Sometimes people wake up and find the portrait tilted on the wall like someone tried to take it down. Sometimes the eyes seem to follow you as you walk down the hall. In 2002, 3 college friends, Rachel, Marcus, and Tasha, moved in for cheap rent. They laughed at the ghost stories, taped a blanket over the portrait so they wouldn't have to look at it at night. Inside, a yellowed wedding dress, a pair of silk gloves, and a small silver key. One weekend, while unpacking old boxes in the attic, Rachel found an old trunk. Curious, they searched the house until they found an old locked door behind the stairs. Marcus put it on the kitchen table while they talked. The 3 of them ran up to see. The wall behind it was cracked, and carved into the wood underneath were 4 words. Behind it was a tiny bedroom, dust thick on the floor, old wallpaper crumbling. The key fit. The door swung open with a long groan. When Marcus turned it over, they saw a photo of Eliza, same as the portrait, but this one was different. He shrugged it off, said the house was old, probably just rotten beams. On the bed lay a rotted quilt and a single photo frame face down on the pillow. In the photo, Eliza's face looked afraid. One eye was bruised. Shadowy figure stood behind her, a man in an old suit, face half hidden. The friends brought the photo downstairs, as they argued about what to do with it. Rachel wanted to give it to the local museum. Tasha said, "Burn it." An hour later, the portrait upstairs crashed to the floor, shattering its glass. "She's still here. Leave," they called the landlord. The next night, Rachel woke to the sound of a woman crying softly in the hallway. She opened her door. The portrait was gone. They found it the next morning, propped against the attic door, like someone had carried it up the stairs. The friends moved out before the semester ended. They left the key and the photo behind. She just stood by the back door staring at Adam. Today, new tenants still say the same thing. The portrait sometimes disappears for a night, only to return cracked or tilted. And every so often, when the wind howls through the attic, you can hear a soft whisper in the walls. She's still here. Leave. The last bus home. He told his roommate about the strange woman. His roommate's face went pale. The driver shrugged and kept driving. No one wanted to argue on the last route of the night. In the late 1980s, there was a bus route that ran through a stretch of farmland just outside Omaha, Nebraska. Route 17 was a nightline, mostly factory workers, students, and the occasional drifter trying to get back into the city before midnight. One cold November night in 1987, a college student named Adam took the last bus home after studying late at the library. He sat near the back, headphones on, half asleep, the bus nearly empty. At the next stop, a woman got on. She looked out of place. Tall, pale, wearing a long gray coat buttoned up to her chin. She didn't sit down. He turned. There she was, standing by the back door again, staring at him. When the driver asked her for her fare, she didn't answer. She just kept staring. This time, the driver didn't ask for her fare. He didn't even look in the mirror. For a second, her face flickered. Sunken eyes, skin pale as paper. Adam took off his headphones. After a few miles, the bus pulled to a stop by an old abandoned cannery. The woman turned and walked off into the dark. And see her standing at the back door, coat buttoned tight, waiting for her stop. Adam watched her disappear into the tall weeds, coat fluttering behind her. When he got home, Adam couldn't shake it. He asked Adam if he'd ever heard of the cannery ghost. Back in 1952, a woman named Lillian Moore worked at the cannery. She'd stay late, closing up alone. One night, she never came home. They found her purse by the loading dock and her coat hanging inside. Her body was never found. Ever since, people said they'd see her walking along the highway near the cannery, coat buttoned tight, looking for a ride that never came. Adam laughed it off. An urban legend to mess with freshmen. But the next night, he had to take the same bus again. Same driver, same empty seats. He sat in the same spot, headphones on, half dozing. Then he felt it. Cold air brushing the back of his neck. He pressed himself into his seat. The bus rolled on, humming through the frozen dark. At the cannery stop, the bus lurched to a halt. The woman turned and looked straight at Adam. Then she stepped off the bus and vanished into the weeds. Adam never rode that route again. He switched his schedule, took daytime classes only. But people still talk about Route 17. Some nights the last passenger will feel a sudden chill. The patient who stayed. In rural Ohio, there is a small community hospital that's been operating since the 1940s. The kind of place with squeaky linoleum. Its floors humming, vending machines in the halls, and nurses who know everyone by name. Down in the oldest wing is room 299, a plain single room that staff always joke about but never want for their patients. Some say it's bad luck. Some say it's just superstition. But nurses whisper about what happened there in the winter of 1973, that year. A man named Raymond Ellis checked in. Mid-50s, no family, no visitors. Brought in by ambulance during a snowstorm after he collapsed in the street. He told the nurses he had no next of kin, no address. He refused to let them transfer him to a larger hospital. Said he liked it there, warm and quiet. She pushed open his door and found him sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, dead. His charts said he had pneumonia, but his eyes staff remembered them as dark, distant, like he was somewhere else entirely. Raymond Ellis stayed in room 209 for weeks. At night, nurses heard him talking to someone in a low voice, even when no one was with him. One night, a young nurse named Darlene did her rounds. The doctor signed the death certificate, and the orderly wheeled his body out. Another nurse came running. But when they opened the door again, the bed was empty. The next night, Darlene checked the room and nearly dropped her chart. Raymond Ellis was there, lying in the bed like he'd never left. They rushed in. Ethan was on the floor, pale, staring at the empty bed. She called for help. Nothing, they chalked it up to stress. Lack of sleep. Lack of sleep. But Darlene refused to step inside room 209 again. Over the years, patients assigned to that room would complain of a man sitting in the corner at night. Dark eyes, distant voice, muttering words no one could quite catch. He volunteered to stay overnight in room 209 on a dare. And if you ask the night staff, they'll tell you. Some patients check in, but not all of them ever really check out. In 2009, a young nurse named Ethan decided to prove it was all nonsense. He brought a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and a recording app on his phone. At 3:17 a.m., the nurses at the station heard the emergency buzzer blaring. When they asked what happened, he wouldn't speak. He only showed them the recording. On it, faint but clear, was a low male voice whispering, "You shouldn't be here. This is my room." Ethan quit the hospital that month. Today, room 209 still gets used, but only when every other room is full. The Vanishing at Blackwood Forest. It was a cold October evening when Sarah Matthews decided to take a shortcut through Blackwood Forest. The sun had already dipped below the horizon, leaving the twisted trees in darkness. Sarah was a young woman in her mid-20s, known for her adventurous spirit, but even she felt a shiver creep down her spine as she stepped under the dense canopy. But something wasn't right. The usual sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, were gone. Silence swallowed the woods whole. Locals always whispered about Blackwood, a place where people entered but rarely returned. Sarah laughed it off. Tonight was just a quick walk home. Halfway through, Sarah's phone flickered with a message from an unknown number. Turn back. She paused, heart pounding. Maybe a prank? But then came another message, more chilling. You're not alone. She spun around. Nothing. Just the eerie silence again. But her instincts screamed danger. The path twisted unnaturally, as if the forest itself was trying to trap her. Then, out of the darkness, a figure appeared, tall, motionless, wearing a tattered mask that resembled a twisted smile. Panic rising, she quickened her steps. The shadows between the trees seemed to stretch, closing in on her. Suddenly, a snapping twig echoed behind her. No trace of Sarah was ever found. The forest had claimed another victim. She was traveling solo, planning to explore the city and attend school. Friends described her as bright, cheerful, and full of life. The hotel staff reported her missing, but the search found no immediate clues. The hotel maintenance staff investigated and made a horrifying discovery. Eliza's body was found inside one of the rooftop water tanks. The tanks were secured by heavy locked doors and a fence nearly impossible to access. Her breath hitched. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Sarah broke into a run, branches clawing at her face. Air froze. The figure lifted a hand, pointing at her. The last thing anyone saw was Sarah disappearing into the blackness, swallowed by the forest. Days later, her backpack was found hanging from a tree, ripped open, belongings scattered like a message. She pressed multiple buttons, hid in corners, peered out suspiciously, and made strange, jerky movements, almost like she was hiding from someone or something unseen. A place haunted by murders, suicides, and a long list of tragic events. It had earned a reputation as a magnet for misfortune. The disappearance of Elisa Lam. In early 2013, the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles was known for its dark past. On January 26th, Eliza Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian student, checked into the Cecil Hotel alone. But just a week later, Eliza vanished without a trace. Her family grew increasingly worried as days passed with no contact. Then, for weeks after Elisa's disappearance, the hotel guests began complaining about low water pressure and strange-tasting water. How could she have gotten up there? Even more disturbing was the bizarre security footage released to the public. Eliza inside a hotel elevator, behaving erratically. Experts and viewers alike were baffled. Was Eliza suffering a psychotic episode? Was she trying to escape danger? Or was something far more sinister at play? The official report declared her death accidental, possibly due to bipolar disorder-induced behavior leading to drowning. But the internet refused to let go. Conspiracy theories flourished. Some claimed supernatural forces haunted the Cecil, others suspected foul play, or even a cover-up. Several mysterious details deepened the mystery. Why was the water tank lid unsealed, allowing Eliza inside? How did she climb the 6-foot fences and enter the locked rooftop? Why did her body remain undiscovered for weeks despite numerous hotel guests and staff? Friends who knew Eliza said she was not suicidal, but rather excited about her trip. Investigators never found conclusive evidence of another person's involvement. The Cecil Hotel continued its grim reputation, a chilling reminder of a young woman's life cut short, swallowed by shadows and unanswered questions. To this day, the strange elevator video and the mystery of Eliza Lamb's death keep haunting those who dare to watch. The Man in the Crawl Space. In the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, there's a row of mid-century houses built close together, each with a cramped crawl space beneath the floorboards to keep out the damp. Most homeowners never think about it. Out of sight, out of mind. In 2011, a young couple, Mark and Jenna, bought one of those houses. It was their first home. Tiny backyard, squeaky doors, a fixer-upper, but it felt perfect. About a month after moving in, Jenna started hearing noises at night. Faint scratching under the floorboards while Mark was snoring beside her. He promised to check it out, but kept putting it off. He told her it was just old pipes, or maybe raccoons getting under the house. She padded barefoot to the kitchen for a glass of water and froze. One night, Jenna woke up thirsty. She knelt down and saw the crawl space hatch inside, slightly ajar. The cabinet door beneath the sink was open and a cold draft blew out. Heart pounding, she woke Mark. He grabbed a flashlight and crawled under the house the next morning. He found old insulation, dusty pipes, and a torn sleeping bag in the corner. Next to it was a cracked plastic flashlight, empty beer cans, and something that made Mark's stomach drop: a stack of Polaroids. They searched the crawl space and found clear signs someone had been living there: discarded food wrappers, a small radio, even a little camp stove. The photos showed Mark and Jenna sleeping in their bed, eating breakfast at the table, watching TV on the couch. All taken from inside the house. Police found footprints leading to the edge of the woods behind the neighborhood, then nothing. The police were called. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't shake the feeling that every creak in the walls was him, waiting for them to close their eyes. He must have slipped out during the day to steal food and batteries. No one knew how long he'd been there. Weeks, maybe months. But he was gone now. Mark and Jenna changed the locks, sealed the crawl space, and installed cameras. But 2 weeks later, one of the cameras caught motion in the backyard. A blurry figure crouched under the porch, watching their bedroom window. The police came back, searched the woods again. Still nothing. They moved out 6 months later. The new owners say they've never had a problem. But sometimes when they go down to the basement, they swear they hear a soft scratching behind the walls, like someone's still looking for a way back inside. Around midnight, Brian spotted a flicker of yellow light moving through the trees. The trail of lanterns in the forests of western Pennsylvania. There's a stretch of trail that locals call Lantern Path by day. It's just a winding dirt track through tall pine trees, quiet except for birds and the sound of wind in the branches.
Ow.
Brian grabbed his flashlight and stepped into the trees to prove it was nothing. Probably another group of campers, messing around. But at night, people say, you can see little lights flickering in the distance. Old oil lanterns, bobbing through the trees like someone's leading you deeper. In 1995, 3 college friends, Lisa, Brian, and Darren, went camping there over fall break. They'd heard the ghost stories but laughed them off as local nonsense. They weren't superstitious. They found no footprints, no campsite, no signs of Brian at all, except his flashlight lying in the brush a mile from their tent. No answer. Only the cold breeze through the branches. On the second night, they sat by the fire, drinking cheap beer. He joked that it was the Lantern Man, come to take them away. Darren laughed too, until the light came closer. Then another light appeared behind it, and another weaving between the trees like people walking in a line. He told police he liked the way the lanterns looked in the trees. Like a parade no one could see but him. Lisa felt uneasy. She told the guys they should pack up and leave. Minutes passed. Brian didn't come back. Darren called his name, but the woods swallowed the sound. But people still do, and some claim they see the lights drifting between the pines, long after midnight, swinging back and forth, leading them deeper than they mean to go. Then, further away, another flicker, a light swinging back and forth, like someone holding a lantern and walking slowly. Lisa and Darren shouted for Brian. They called 911 on an old flip phone with 1 bar of signal. When rangers found them at dawn, Lisa and Darren were huddled by the dead fire, but Brian was gone. Search teams combed the forest for days. Months passed. Then a break. A hunter walking the same woods stumbled onto an old shed, half buried in vines. Inside they found Brian's jacket, torn and muddy, and a set of rusty old lanterns hanging from nails on the wall. Old newspaper clippings? Lantern oil? Rope? The shed belonged to a man named Everett Cole, a local recluse who'd once worked as a ranger. When police arrested him, they found maps of the trails marked with red circles, spots where hikers had vanished over the years. Everett confessed to luring hikers off the trail with the lights, then hunting them down one by one. They never found Brian's body, just scraps of clothing and the rusty blade Everett used to carve notches into the trees, each time he added one more. Lantern Path is still there. Rangers warned campers not to stay overnight. The Cleveland Strangler, Anthony Sewell, in the heart of Cleveland. Ohio, a quiet neighborhood, held a terrifying secret for years. The case of Anthony Sewell, later dubbed the Cleveland Strangler, shocked the nation with its gruesome revelations and haunting unanswered questions. Anthony Sewell was an unassuming man, a factory worker known to some neighbors as quiet, others as odd, but no one suspected the horror lurking behind his door. They were women struggling with addiction, poverty, or homelessness, often last seen near Sewell's neighborhood. 10 women, mostly vulnerable and marginalized, vanished from the streets of Cleveland. For years, the disappearances went unnoticed by many, dismissed or overlooked by the system. But then, in October 2009, a shocking discovery shattered the community. Sewell's landlord, growing suspicious of a foul smell emanating from his tenant's house, called the police. When officers arrived, they were met with a horrific scene. The bodies of 11 women hidden throughout the house, in closets, under floors, and in the backyard. Some victims were found in advanced stages of decomposition, others bound and strangled. The evidence revealed a chilling pattern of control and violence. But what made the case even more disturbing was the way Sewell managed to evade suspicion for so long. Neighbors heard screams but rarely called the police. Social services failed to follow up on missing persons reports, and Sewell himself continued to live normally, even attending church and family gatherings. During his trial, Sewell appeared cold and detached, showing little remorse. He claimed some victims died accidentally during consensual sex, but the overwhelming evidence told a darker story. The media coverage highlighted the systemic failures, how society had failed these women, and how the justice system overlooked their disappearances. Community demanded answers. How could this happen right under their noses? Anthony Sewell was convicted and sentenced to death in 2011. But the scars he left on Cleveland's soul remain. The Cleveland Strangler case is a grim reminder of the darkness that can hide behind ordinary faces, and how society's blind spots can enable horror to persist. But beneath the glitz and glamour, a darkness was about to grip the nation's attention, and it all began with the brutal murder of Elizabeth Short. But her life was cut violently short. She was posed deliberately, lying face up, her body severed cleanly at the waist. Her face was slashed from the corners of her mouth to her ears in a ghastly Glasgow smile. The murder of Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia mystery. Los Angeles, 1947, a city basking in the golden glow of post-war optimism. Elizabeth, just 22 years old, had dreams of becoming a movie star. She arrived in LA with hope and ambition, like so many others. On January 15, 1947, her mutilated body was found in a vacant lot in the Limerick Park neighborhood. The horror of the scene stunned the city. The media quickly dubbed her the Black Dahlia, inspired by a popular film noir playing at the time. The investigation was one of the largest in LAPD history, but the case was riddled with problems. Elizabeth's life was mysterious. Fragmented accounts, shady acquaintances, and no solid leads. Theories abounded. Was it a jealous lover? A sadistic killer? Someone from the dark underworld? The police received thousands of tips and letters, including from a man claiming responsibility, but none led to a definitive suspect. One chilling detail stood out. The killer had expertly drained the blood from Elizabeth's body, showing knowledge of anatomy. The brutality suggested a deep rage, but the careful staging implied a twisted signature. Years later, countless suspects surfaced, from doctors and police officers to lowlifes and lovers. But the Black Dahlia case remains officially unsolved. The mystery of who killed Elizabeth Short and why haunts the city to this day. Was it a crime of passion, a disturbed mind, or something far more sinister lurking beneath LA's glossy surface? The Black Dahlia murder stands as one of America's most notorious cold cases, a haunting riddle wrapped in blood and silence. The cabin in Keddie for people went to sleep in a tiny cabin, a cluster of worn cabins tucked into the Sierra Nevada, thick pine forest swallowing the edges of town. By dawn, 3 would never wake up, and the real nightmare was only beginning. She left her abusive husband, packed her station wagon, and landed in Keddie, hoping to scrape by on welfare and odd jobs. Sue's oldest daughter, Sheila, spent the night at the neighbor's place next door. Back in the spring of 1981, the tiny rural community of Keddie, California, was the kind of place that barely made a dot on the map. Most people there were broke, chasing cheap rent and cheap booze, trying to outrun something. Tina, her shy 12-year-old daughter, fell asleep in the small back bedroom. For months, deputies dragged the Feather River, combed the woods. Nothing. That's what brought Sue Sharp and her 5 kids to Cabin 28. Dental records confirmed what Sue's sister already knew in her bones. Tina never made it out alive. The night of April 11th was ordinary pizza dinner. TV on the old wooden set, kids drifting off to bed. The crime scene sat open for hours, contaminated by curious neighbors and bumbling deputies. Others whispered it was more a secret involving Sue's ex, or something worse, tied to what she might have seen or known. Others swear it's been bulldozed to the ground. But old-timers in Keddie say that when the wind howls through the pines at night, you can hear the cabin door creak open, and a girl's voice, thin as smoke, asking to come home. But what they did left stains on the cabin floor that never really washed out. Inside Cabin 28 were Sue, her 15-year-old son John, John's friend Dana, and Sue's youngest boys, Rick and Greg. Nobody heard the intruders come in. Nobody knows how they got inside without waking the kids. The next morning, Sheila stepped through the front door and found her mother, her brother John, and Dana lying in the living room. Bound with medical tape and electrical wire, no one ever confessed. I said yes. Broke college kid, easy money. We pried open the attic door and found piles of old boxes, stained blankets, a rocking chair with its seat torn out. He'd planned to flip the house, tear out the rotten floorboards, sell the lot to developers. Throats slashed so deep they nearly lost their heads. It sat abandoned for over a decade after the last known resident, Harold Holt, simply vanished one fall night, leaving dinner still warm on the table, and gagged, sitting in the same rocking chair upstairs. I thought maybe it was just junk, until Tom pried it open. They swore they'd hear footsteps upstairs, or see someone in the attic window, even though the house had no power. Beneath the insulation, they found a false wall. Behind it, the remains of 15 women, each wrapped in plastic, stacked like broken mannequins. He was a quiet predator who lured drifters, waitresses, and housemaids to his lonely ridge, where nobody heard them scream. Furniture was overturned, blood spattered the walls. A kitchen knife, bent in half, lay in the sink like a discarded toy, but Tina was gone. Just gone, no blood trail, no footprints out the door. When the pact ran out, he was taken. Over 30 names. Then, 3 years later, a bottle collector stumbled on a skull fragment and a child's jacket 50 miles away in Butte County. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said it was a local job, a jealous neighbor, a drug debt, revenge. Sheriff's reports got lost. Leads went cold. Decades later, new DNA tests hinted at people who'd long since died or disappeared into the hills. Some folks say Cabin 28 still stands, hidden under boarded windows and rotting beams. To this day, nobody's been convicted. His eyes fixed on the corner where the trunk used to be. waiting for his final guest to come collect. Cabin 28 sits somewhere under the dirt and needles, but the stain it left on Ketty never faded. The house on Copper Ridge sometimes. A house isn't haunted by ghosts, but by secrets far more alive. In 1978, nestled at the edge of dense woods just outside Asheville, North Carolina, there was an old farmhouse everyone called the Holt Place. Locals called it cursed. Kids dared each other to break in on Halloween. When I was in college, my Uncle Tom bought that land for cheap. He asked me to help clear out the attic one winter break. The first day there was freezing. The place smelled like wet mold and old wood smoke. But there was one thing that didn't make sense. The floorboards in the far corner were newer than the rest. Fresh nails, clean wood, wrong century. I pulled the boards up with a crowbar. Beneath them was a lock trunk, heavy iron latches. Inside were dozens of Polaroids, dozens. All of them grainy, but each showed the same thing, different women bound. Behind them, in every photo, Harold Holt, grinning like a butcher in a Sunday suit. At first we thought they were staged, sick joke, but taped under the lid was a leather ledger, each page marked with a date and initials. The earliest was from 1958. The latest matched the week Holt disappeared. Tom called the sheriff. They tore up the whole attic. Turns out Harold Holt wasn't just the weird hermit who tended his goats and hunted deer. The most chilling thing, the last page of the ledger had a single line scribbled in shaky ink. "She'll all come for me next." Rumors spread that Holt made a pact. Some said with the devil, others said the woods themselves, trading lives for prosperity. To this day, people swear that if you stand in the attic at midnight, you'll see Harold sitting in that rocking chair. My uncle tore the house down the next spring, sold the lot for a fraction of what he'd hoped. Sometimes I drive past Copper Ridge when I visit Asheville. There's nothing left but a dip in the earth. Wild grass growing where secrets once slept beneath the boards. They say the rocking chair was never found.